Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Melanie.
Hi, my name's Melanie. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you. Ooh, thanks. Okay. All right. I'd like to thank Branny for asking me to come out and share with you on Christmas Day. Glad to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. I really need to be right now. My sponsor's having me go to a meeting every single day. It was actually my idea, so I can't really blame her, but she thought it was a good idea too. So, I broke up with my boyfriend a couple weeks ago, and it's really hard to do that before Christmas. But it was the right thing to do, so. Anyways, and I've learned I've been sober for a little over 12 and a half years. My sobriety date is June 10th of 1992. And I've learned really slowly over those years that most of the time it's, it doesn't matter so much what I want. It matters what I'm supposed to do to stay sober, and this was one of those things where I had to do it in order to stay sober. So I will share with you in 30 minutes my experience in a general way, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So I come from a little town up north, San Luis Obispo, and I don't know if any of you know that town, but it's small, and when I was growing up there, it was even smaller, and I don't even think they've built a Staples store yet. Everybody's protesting it when they try to build something like that there. So you can't have drive-throughs. It's the smog, and they don't. My sisters and I got it there quick. So and there's not a lot to do there if you're young, except for drink and go to the beach. So I grew up with these two people who should not have had children. It was really obvious. I found, God bless my parents. I mean, I don't have a relationship with them today just because sometimes the best relationship you can have with people is no relationship. And, that's the best it can be, is none. So I share about that. It might not be the right thing to do for you, but it was the right thing to do for me. And my dad was a professor at the university, but he wasn't really around except when he was doing things that he wasn't supposed to be doing. We grew up in a house where there was a lot of violence of every kind, and it was not okay for me to be a kid. And I remember being 7 years old and being afraid to go to sleep at night and having something that I called the swallow sickness. And what it was an anxiety attack. I couldn't sleep at night. I was really afraid. And I was angry, and I felt alone, and I shut down at 7 years old. And I remember thinking, nobody understands me. The people at school don't understand me. My mom doesn't understand me, and there's nowhere to go. I'm just going to shut right in. And I did that over the years until I got sober at 24 years old. So my dad was a professor, so it wasn't like we didn't have an income, but for some reason we slept in cribs till we were 5. And I just remember my mom, somebody giving us beds, and my mom saying, gosh, Liz Weber said that I needed to get you kids some beds, as if it was like something that she didn't understand, that we should have beds. And we didn't have dressers. We had, our clothes were in piles. There was a bed in the living room. It was just, there was no furniture. And I guess it was okay. It was the gentleman before shared about the 60s. I mean, this was the 60s and the 70s, and maybe it was cool for them. I don't know. But I didn't know how to have friends. My mother said that she was afraid to deal with other people, so she didn't want us having friends to come over. So we were just my sisters and I grew up in this isolated existence. And I remember, just like I said, being angry and confused and alone. And I didn't know, I loved my sisters. I didn't know how to tell them that. I didn't know how to express any kind of good feeling towards them at all. I just remember being 11 or 12 and not knowing how to talk to my sister except in this special language that I invented. And I wanted to tell her that I loved her, but I didn't know how. And So when I was 14 years old and took my first drink, I really needed it, I guess. I didn't realize that I needed it, but I must have, because I felt a lot better. And I don't know about you, but that's the reason I drank, was to feel better and have a good time. And I would tell you that nothing bad happened to me when I drank. I did not black out. I didn't pass out. I didn't do anything stupid. The worst I did was ate a box of Triscuits. And that was important to me because I was a ballet dancer, and that was really what I wanted to be. And so I was trying to be thin. But, you know, that didn't even seem like such a big deal. I just had a good time. And I drank this Tanqueray gin with my friend Amy Troutner, who was the first real friend that I had. And Amy's mom was not around much. She let us, you know, have boys over. Her 8-year-old brother was smoking pot with us, and her older brother was, you know, giving us drugs and stuff like that. And so I liked being at Amy's house. And I'd say that I'm really glad that I found drugs and alcohol. I believe I would have killed myself at a really young age had I not found a way out, and I needed a way out. And alcohol and drugs gave me the courage to fight. It gave me the courage to put a lock on my door when I needed one. It gave me the courage, it allowed me not to go crazy, because I felt most of the time that I was gonna be flattened like a pancake. I felt like I was just going to disappear, that there were things going on that weren't right, and I didn't know how to talk about it, and I didn't know how to say anything, and I was scared. And so alcohol gave me that way out. So like I said, nothing bad happened except for the fact that I started fighting. Amy had her own phone, and, I wanted my own phone. So I started fighting with my parents a lot. I wanted this phone, and I was wrecking such havoc. Now, I talk a lot about the sort of like this kind of not very fun existence that I grew up in, but my sisters are not alcoholics. So they don't have a drinking problem, and they don't have a drug problem. So clearly, there was something going on with me that wasn't going on with them. I'm an alcoholic because I drank too much. I lost my choice in drink, and I'm glad I did, actually. So I can't blame anybody for the fact that I'm an alcoholic, but I can take responsibility for it now that I know it's not my fault, maybe, that I'm an alcoholic. Maybe it's not my fault that I was chemically set up that way. I don't know, but it sure is my responsibility. Once I found out that I'm an alcoholic, it sure was my responsibility to do something about it if I wanted to live in this world and be a productive member of society, which wasn't what I wanted when I got here, by the way. Anyway, so I started fighting a lot. They stuck us in family therapy, to try to figure out what the problem with Melanie was, and there was all this fighting and nothing worked. And, my story is just, I have people with these, these drunkalogs. My story doesn't feel very exciting, but it's, I drank a lot, and I went to the beach, and my drinking career is characterized by lines that I said I would never cross. Oh, I'll never do this, and boom, I do it. Oh, I'll never do this, boom, I do it. So, I lied a lot, and I stole the first thing I stole. I was 5 years old, and I stole gum and stuck it in my underwear and walked out of the store. And my dad made me take it back, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with stealing, so I kept stealing. And I stole other people's boyfriends. That's that was didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I found out in sobriety that you can't do those things and stay sober, and why would you want to anyway? So. I got really good grades. Grades were really important. I got really good grades, and when I started drinking, I started, not doing well in school, obviously. And I said I would never smoke pot, and I started smoking pot. By the time I was 16 years old, I was doing bong loads, in the back, not understanding, in the back of school, not understanding why, when I went home that evening, I was so hungry, and why was I eating so much? And, 2 hamburgers, not 1, and you know how that works. And I never thought that I would be doing those things. I was, supposedly a smart girl. I was talented in the area of the arts, I guess. And, but I just wanted to feel better. And when I drank, I could do things like kiss a boy, I could, because before, when I wasn't drinking, and if anybody came to me with their hand, or if anybody tried to touch me, I would flinch. That was I'd be, like my cousin was showing me how to dive once. I was 11 years old, and he put his arms around me to show me how to dive, and I freaked out. And when I drank, I didn't freak out about those things. In fact, I could do all kinds of things that I probably should have been freaking out about, but I wasn't freaking out about anything, actually. So, so I started, crossing the line, like doing drugs. I said I was never going to do drugs. I started smoking pot. I said, I will, like I said, my first boyfriend was this other girl's boyfriend, and, that wasn't really okay with me, but I didn't care. I mean, why not? And that's just kind of the way it went. I had a lot of fun for a really long time, and there's people that I hear say that my best day drinking is not as good as my worst day sober. That's not true for me. I've had a lot of pain in sobriety, and I've actually hit bottoms in sobriety. And I had a lot of fun drinking. We moved to England when I was 18 years old. That's significant in my drinking career because the drinking age is 18. Actually, I was 17, but we moved there, and the drinking age is 18, so you can drink legally there. And I was drinking every single day. And, I had a lot of fun at first, and then there's that fun with problems stage where, I was starting to get in a lot of trouble for my drinking, and my parents would ground me. I started going off with people I didn't know into London, and that's not very safe for a 17-year-old girl drunk. I don't know the country, I don't know the city, and I just started putting myself in really, really bad situations. And I remember, I flipped this guy off once coming off the subway because he pushed me, and he came back and he grabbed me by the head and slammed me up against the wall. And those things happened a lot, and I kind of didn't know how I was getting into these sort of situations where I was getting hurt. It was, clearly I didn't have a clue. And I just, you shouldn't flip people off, I guess, So the guy before me was talking about how crossing that invisible line, and I think I kind of started crossing that invisible line somewhere around 18 and 17 when I drank every day, and that was fine with me. And when I was 18 years old, I came back from England, really glad to come back from England because that whole year I didn't want to be there. I was a beach girl, and and I didn't want to be in England going to school, and all I did was drink and upset other people. And then when I was 18, I was going to college, and I got assaulted by somebody, and it was somebody that I knew. And before I was drinking and using it, it was a party, and, you're 16, you're 17, all your friends are drinking. You don't really notice the abnormality of what you're doing because of a lot of people party like that. My friends were doing it, and, as far as I know, some of them aren't alcoholics, and they were doing it worse than me. But when this thing happened to me, I noticed that when I would smoke a joint, the pain would go away. Now, before, I just felt better when I was drinking and using. I could do things I wanted to do. I didn't worry about it. I wasn't so uptight, and I was more of a free spirit. But now it was like I was in a lot of pain, and I smoked a joint, and it went away. And so I started drinking and using medicinally because I wanted to kill that pain. Now, there had been a lot of weird stuff happening to us, growing up, but this was somebody that was supposed to be in my circle of friends, and and it was like all of a sudden the world was not really, really not safe, and boy, was I off. There's something wrong with a 20-year-old who says the whole year, I can't wait to turn 21. The whole year about being 20 is about waiting to turn 21 so that you can drink legally, and that's what my whole 20th year was about. And, now I'm getting into a lot of trouble, and I can't hold a job, not because I don't know how to do a job, but because I can't get along with other people. I'm rude, I'm surly, I kind of look at people funny when they ask me to do something, and, it's just, I don't know how I kept these jobs, I was a bus girl at a restaurant, and, the waiters would ask me to take drinks out, and I would look at them like they were crazy, and these are the people tipping me out, and I would make fun of the owner, like in front of other people, and they fired me and said it might be better if I got a job across the street at the pub, and that was definitely better for me because that was a nightclub, and I would probably, I had a good time there. They didn't serve hard alcohol, so me and my friend would call the bar up the street and have them order two double shots of tequila, have them ready for us, and we would just run up there and take these double shots. And I remember being so drunk one time that I drank this tequila and started to retch on the bar, and I had to go throw up so I could drink more. Now, and by then I'm getting, I'm just depressed all the time. I'm like depressed unless I'm drinking, and I thought I had mono. So you know, I had been kissing a lot of boys, so I thought I had mono, and I went to this therapist, and I'd been in and out of therapy because by then I'd also developed an eating disorder, and I'd been in and out of therapy and just, you know, not understanding what's going on. And he said to me, the doctor said that you don't have mono. You might want to see this therapist. So I went to see a therapist again, like I said, and I didn't know how to talk to him. I have a difficult time talking in general sometimes, in case you haven't noticed, but. I did not know how to speak to this man, and it says in the big book that, you know, something about these good doctors, they couldn't really help us because we were unwilling to be honest, and I just didn't know how to be honest. I would hand him my journal and say, read it, and it would say things like, I got so wasted last night, I had so much fun, I don't remember a thing. And he would say, Melanie, that's not normal to drink so much that you don't remember a thing. That's not normal. And I'd be like, well, you know, whatever, and all my friends drink, and, you know, it just... But then other things, like just that whole thing where it's like, now I have a boyfriend, and now I'm cheating on my boyfriend, and I don't want to be cheating on my boyfriend. I'm doing things like coming home in other guys' clothes. I mean, you know, my friend Rhonda talks about how, you know, thank God she grew up in the 60s, because if it would have been the 50s, she would have been a slut. Now, I don't know any way you look at it. I was still a slut, you know, but... and, you know... And I say that because it's the truth. I mean, you know, that's where alcohol took me. I didn't want to be like that. I didn't consider myself like that. I considered myself pristine. And I was not. I was doing things that I was ashamed of. And this guy that I lived with was saving my life because I had nowhere to go. You know, I couldn't go home, and I couldn't hold a job. And, you know, God bless him. I hope he's sober, because this guy, I mean, he did as much partying as I did. And, you know... Anyway, you know, so I'm doing things that I'm ashamed of, and I'm in therapy, and it's being suggested to me that I stop drinking and using. And I don't want to stop, because I don't think I have a problem. I look at alcoholics as the people in trench coats that hang out in park and drink alcohol out of bags. Well, towards the end of my drinking career, I was hanging out in the park with my other boyfriend, drinking beer out of a paper bag. Now, that's pretty alcoholic, and towards the end of my drinking career, I had lost my license, not because I got a DUI, but because I couldn't get it together to register my car. So I would get tickets for driving an unregistered car, and then not show up to court, and then get a failure to appear, and then I'd get parking tickets. I had like $500 worth of parking tickets at a couple of times, and the parking tickets in San Luis Obispo are $7 a piece. It's really hard to get $500 worth of parking tickets twice in a row. So, and I was going to school. I was trying to go to college, and, you know, I would go to college, but I couldn't manage to get there without this tumbler of wine cooler. You know, it's the 80s, so it's like wine coolers, California coolers, and Bartles and James, and I couldn't get to class without a tumbler of wine cooler between my legs, and then I couldn't make it to class, and then I couldn't get it together to not go to get out of school. So I just, you know, my transcripts now, if I ever want to go back to school, it's going to be really hard because I have so many F's and withdrawals and all over the place. So I was a straight A student. I went to the psych ward when I was 24 years old because I thought I was going to lose control of my limbs and kill myself. And by then I had been burning myself with cigarettes, and I'd been burning myself with cigarettes partly because it was a big, you know, tantrum, and partly because it was the only way I knew how to get out of the pain. I did not know that sometimes it's as simple as stop doing the things that make you feel bad. I did not make that connection until I was several years sober. And so I would do these things that I was ashamed of, and I'd be sober the next day, and I'd be like, God, why did I do that? And I'd burn myself with a cigarette because that was the only way I knew how to feel better. And they suggested to me one more time, and I had tried various methods. I had tried taking Antabuse, and the way that being powerless over alcohol works for me is that, you know, when I would be taking Antabuse, you're not supposed to drink. You know, if you have to stop taking it for 2 weeks before you drink again. So I would plan my drinks, and I wouldn't be drinking. So that tells me that the problem centers in my mind, that once again the alcoholism's talking, and, you know, despite all of these things that I had done that I hated, I would, you know, my alcoholism would be talking. It's summertime, margaritas, beach, you know, you're still looking good, go to the beach and have a drink. And I wasn't drinking, and so I would plan, and I would stop taking Antabuse, and I would I would drink again, and then it would get worse. And I was, like I said, riding my bike around town because I didn't have a car, and I went to a party once. I would party crash, and these guys took my bike because I looked like the type of girl that would have stole the bike, and and so they wouldn't let me have my bike back, and that was my only means of transportation, and that was pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization for me because it was my bike, and these guys wouldn't let me have it back, and somebody there had knew me and said, yeah, it's her bike, give it to her so she can leave, and my mom wrote me a letter because I was sort of doing that alcoholic thing where I'm living at my boyfriend's, but kind of living with my mom. My stuff's at my mom's house, but I'm living with my boyfriend. She wrote me a letter saying, and this is, it was probably the most lucid thing she had ever done, because I've come to find out later in the years that my mother's certifiably mentally ill, and I believe, I don't know what it was how she wrote this letter, but it said, you're dying, you won't stop drinking, and I don't want to watch you die, and you're not welcome around the house because I don't want to watch you die. And to hear that when you're 24 years old, it got my attention. And she said, Dr. Yelverton doesn't want to see you anymore because you don't want to stop drinking. And so I called a rehab, and they said it was a Monday, and they said you could come Wednesday, and that was too soon. But for some reason, I took the bed that they had to offer. I don't know why. You get these little windows of opportunity, I feel, when we're trying to get sober. You just get that window, and for some reason, I was able to jump through it. And in that rehab, see, I'd been in the psych ward twice before, but they always addressed my mental problems. They never addressed the fact that I was an alcoholic. And in this rehab, they addressed the fact that I was an alcoholic and nothing else. Who cares what you do? Who you are, how you feel. You're an alcoholic and you need to go to meetings, and you need to go to meetings every day, and if you don't go to meetings, you're going to drink. And I got that. I really got it. For any newcomers that are in the room that haven't identified, or I don't know if we do identify during the marathon meetings, but welcome. I didn't identify for a long time. I'd been kind of going in and out of meetings, but this was the first time I had ever really been made to go to meetings every day. And I started to feel better. And the speaker before me was sharing about how you take away the alcohol, you get the alcoholism, and that was true for me because for 3 years I didn't work the steps. I kind of went to meetings, and you can get sober anywhere because I was still living with the same guy, and they were growing pot and dealing drugs out of the house, brewing beer on the stove, and I would walk to a meeting every day at the Alano Club, and you can stay sober. The psychiatrist also in rehab told me if you keep cheating on your boyfriend, you're not going to stay sober. And so I stopped calling him my boyfriend. It took me like several years before I had, there's cash register honesty and there's emotional honesty. And, at some point the jig was up. I can't behave like that anymore. I can't. And I met a woman, I moved to Los Angeles, I met a woman who I was, lost a job again. This thing with this guy was over, another boyfriend had left, and I was just in my bed crying every single day. I had no idea how to live life on life's terms. And that's, I wasn't drinking, but I was completely insane. And not knowing how to deal with people, arguing with my boss, just not holding on to jobs well. And like you can't do it well. You either hold on to a job or you don't, So, so this woman that I had met, she talked about being in the psych ward. She talked about cutting herself. And that was the first time I had ever heard somebody share that kind of stuff. And this program is one alcoholic talking to another. If anybody's here, you don't identify with me, there's going to be somebody else in Los Angeles that you'll probably identify with if you keep going to meetings. And this woman got my attention, and she taught me that when she feels squirrely, she feels like hurting herself, or she feels like doing things that aren't good, she does step work. And she told me to get a book, she told me to start going to meetings every day, and she taught me how to work the steps. She got me on the 4-step pretty quick, and I had to learn that just because things happened, just because there were some things in my life that weren't fair, like life is fair, there were some things in my life that weren't fair. Some people get handed this deck of cards, some people get handed this deck of cards. It doesn't matter. I am responsible for who I am today, and if, I always say what Tanya Gates has told me, she said, Melanie, if my parents leave me standing on the range when I'm 5 years old, shame on them. If I'm still standing out there by the time I'm 21, shame on me. And I had to look at how I had a part in every single thing that went on in my life. I was assaulted when I was 18 years old. Okay, that wasn't my fault, but the fact that I didn't tell anybody, didn't get any help, I didn't take responsibility for the recovery part of it. So, I had to take responsibility for the things that happened with me when I was a kid. I had to, you know, when I finished working the 12 steps, I'm a big believer in therapy, but it's not a cure for alcoholism. And you got to do Alcoholics Anonymous first, because you know these doctors, they can't tell the difference sometimes. You know, what's alcoholism, what's insanity, we don't know. You know, I had to get my alcoholism out of the way first, and I had to get into some recovery surrounding those issues so that I could live a free woman today. And you know, I had to learn that in order to have friends, I needed to be a good friend. In order to have a nice guy in my life, I had to be a nice girl. You know, you don't get to just take. You get to go out and you have to give. And my sponsor said the self-obsession and the selfishness is going to kill you. It's not about you. And you need to go out there and get panels and start calling 2 people a day and seeing how they're doing. And you need to go and you need to, just answer phones at central office. And several times during Christmas, I had phone shifts at central office just so that I could get through it without being a pain in the ass to anybody else. And that's why I'm really glad to be of service around Christmas time. You know, I think I always share too much of my drunk-a-log, but what it's like today is that I have 2 jobs. You know, a few years ago I got tired of waiting tables, and I went and I decided I was going to get my real estate license, and that's what I did. And that's hard. It's hard to do that. It's commission only, so I have to work at night, and I also have to work during the day. And it's a lot of fun, actually. I enjoy doing it a lot, but I had to go and study for the test and take the test, and I had a lot of support with people from Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I was looking for jobs at companies, there was one place that wouldn't hire me because they didn't want to take somebody that had to go to work at night. And I called a member of this program who said, you just keep trying and you don't give up. And you know, it's not so much about what I get. Again, it's about being a good employee and being of service. And I sponsor girls that I adore. One of them's here, Lauren. Thank you for coming with me. And I don't want to die anymore. I don't have to worry about killing myself. I don't have to worry about burning myself. I don't have to worry about cheating on my boyfriend. I know how not to do those things today. I know, and I'm a free woman. And that's all that I ever really wanted to be, as our first speaker was sharing, is that he wanted to be happy. And you know, I want to be free. But with that, you got to do some things in order to be free. And I don't have to drink today. So I'm really glad to be here and sharing Christmas with you. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.